Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner Stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I paid $10,000 to watch a dark web red room, and what I saw will haunt me forever. Alright, so before you judge me too harshly, I need you to hear me out. I'm not some kind of psychopath or anything. At least I didn't think I was. I'm just an average 23-year-old guy, bored out of his mind, living in a studio apartment above a Starbucks in downtown Chicago. Life's been dull. I work from home doing freelance graphic design, and most of my social life consists of arguing with strangers on Twitter or scrolling endlessly through Reddit. Not exactly thrilling, right? That's probably why I got curious about the deep web. It started harmlessly enough, watching YouTube videos about creepy internet mysteries, hearing those urban legends about hackers or hidden websites. At first, it was just entertainment. But then, I started to wonder, what's real? What's fake? I wanted to know for myself. So, one night, around 2 a.m., prime time for making terrible life choices, I downloaded Tor. For those of you who don't know, Tor is this browser that lets you access the deep web. And no, the deep web isn't all scary illegal stuff. Most of it is just boring government databases and random sites that don't pop up on Google. But then there's the dark web. That's the part you've heard about. The illegal markets, the hitmen for hire ads, and the infamous red rooms. A red room, if you don't know, is basically an online live stream where people pay to watch someone get tortured, or worse. Honestly, I didn't even believe they were real. I figured it was just some edgy internet myth designed to freak people out. But man, I wish I'd just stuck to thinking that. Anyway, I was browsing around, hopping from one random forum to another, when I found this thread. It was called Curiosity Killed the Cat. Catchy, right? The post was vague, but it promised access to something you'll never forget for the low price of $10,000 in Bitcoin. That was the first red flag. Who the hell has 10 grand just lying around? But curiosity had me in a chokehold, and before I knew it, I was messaging the poster. Their username was just X. Real creative. I wasn't planning to actually pay. I figured I'd just ask questions and maybe get a good story out of it. But X didn't waste any time. They responded almost instantly. Are you serious? $10,000. No negotiating. If you're not interested, don't waste my time. Something about the way they said it, typed it, made my skin crawl. But like an idiot, I kept going. I don't even know what I'm paying for, I replied. And then they sent me a link. Just a random string of letters and numbers that looked like gibberish. Click the link. You have 24 hours to decide. That was it. No explanation. No hint about what I'd find. Just a link. I should have stopped there. I should have closed my laptop and gone to bed. But instead, I clicked. The page that loaded was strange. It was all black, with a single video thumbnail in the center. There was no title, no description, just a button that said, "Pay to watch." Now, here's where it gets weirder. The video thumbnail wasn't blurry or generic. It was a live feed. I could see a room, a cold, gray, windowless room, like something out of a prison, or an abandoned warehouse. In the middle of the room was a chair, and sitting in that chair was a man. He was tied up, blindfolded, and gagged. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, trying to figure out if this was some kind of elaborate prank. But the longer I watched, the more real it looked. The guy in the chair was breathing, shallow, panicked breaths. He kept shifting, pulling at the ropes like he was trying to get free. Then out of nowhere, someone stepped into the frame. A tall figure, dressed head to toe in black, wearing one of those creepy blank white masks you'd see in a cheap horror movie. They didn't say anything. They just stood there, staring directly at the camera. I don't know what came over me, but I panicked and closed the tab. My heart was racing, and I felt like I'd just walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. I told myself it was fake, some kind of performance art or twisted ARG, alternate reality game. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. There was something too raw about it, too real. I tried to brush it off and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. That guy in the chair, the look on his face, was burned into my brain. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just seen someone who needed help, someone who didn't have much time left. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to just sit around and wonder what was going on. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to pay the $10,000. Okay, before you freak out, I know it was a dumb idea. Believe me, I've spent every day since then regretting it. But in that moment, it felt like the right thing to do. I told myself I'd watch the stream, figure out where the guy was being held, and call the police. I sold some crypto I'd been holding on to, transferred the Bitcoin, and waited. Within minutes, X sent me a message. "You're in. The stream starts at midnight. Don't be late." That's all they said. No instructions, no explanation, just a countdown to what would become the most horrifying night of my life. By the time midnight rolled around, I was a nervous wreck. I'd set up my laptop on my desk, turned off all the lights, and made sure my door was locked. I kept telling myself I was doing the right thing, that I'd find a way to stop whatever was about to happen. When the countdown hit 0, the stream started. The room was the same as before, gray, cold, empty, except for the man in the chair. Only this time, he wasn't alone. The masked figure was standing behind him, holding something long and sharp that glinted in the dim light. And then, the chat box appeared. There were only a few people in the chat, but their messages sent chills down my spine. Start with the hands. Let's see some blood. Make him scream. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. These weren't just random internet trolls. They were paying customers, and they were choosing what happened next. My stomach turned as the masked figure stepped closer to the man in the chair, raising the blade. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen, glued to the screen as the nightmare unfolded. And then, just as the figure made their first move, something happened that changed everything. My screen went black. When my screen went black, I thought it was over. Part of me felt relieved, like maybe the stream had been shut down, maybe the authorities had stepped in, maybe that poor guy would actually make it out alive. But that sense of relief didn't last long. At first, I just stared at the blank screen, waiting for it to reload. Then, a message popped up, not in the chat box this time, but directly across the screen, in big, red, glitchy letters. "You're still watching." What the hell did that mean? The screen stayed black for a few seconds, but then the video returned. Only, it wasn't the same anymore. The room was still there, the chair, the guy tied up, but the camera angle had changed. Now, it wasn't just showing the room, it was showing me. That's right, my own reflection, staring back at me from the black void of the screen. My apartment was in the frame, my laptop, the cheap IKEA desk, even the pile of empty Starbucks cups I'd been meaning to clean up. It was my apartment, my room. I froze. My heart started pounding so hard, it felt like it might burst out of my chest. How? How could they see me? My webcam light wasn't even on. I scrambled to cover it with a piece of tape, my hands shaking so bad that I nearly knocked my laptop off the desk. The screen flickered again, and now it was back to the room. The guy in the chair was thrashing against his restraints, his muffled screams growing louder. The masked figure had a phone in their hand now. They raised it slowly, as if they were taking a picture, or maybe recording. But it wasn't aimed at the man, it was aimed at the camera. A second later, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from an unknown number. "You're next." I swear to God, I almost threw my phone across the room. My hands were slick with sweat as I stared at the screen. The number wasn't local. It had no area code, just a string of numbers that didn't make any sense. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the image that followed. It was me, sitting at my desk, right then and there. The picture was identical to what I'd seen on the stream, right down to the panicked look on my face and the glow of my laptop screen. But the angle was different, higher, like it had been taken from the corner of my room. I spun around, my eyes darting to every shadow, every corner, every tiny gap in the furniture. There was no one there. I live alone. I locked my door. I bolted my windows. But in that moment, I felt like I wasn't just being watched. I felt like I wasn't alone. I don't even remember deciding to do it, but the next thing I knew, I was yanking the power cord out of my laptop. The screen went dark, and the room fell silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. My phone buzzed again, and I almost didn't want to look, but curiosity, or maybe sheer terror, got the better of me. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a video. I clicked on it, and I instantly wished I hadn't. The footage was grainy and shaky, like it had been filmed on an old phone, but I recognized the location immediately. It was outside my building. The camera panned across the street, stopping to zoom in on my window. My light was still on, the curtains slightly parted, and I could see myself, sitting at my desk, watching the screen. And then the camera turned. Slowly, deliberately, it turned to reveal someone standing in the middle of the street. They were wearing the same blank white mask as the figure in the red room. The video ended there. I dropped my phone and backed away from the desk, nearly tripping over the chair. My brain was racing, trying to piece it all together. How long had they been watching me? How did they know where I lived? And most importantly, what the hell did they want? For the next hour, I just sat there in the dark, clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed from the counter. I kept telling myself it was over, that if I stayed quiet and didn't reopen the stream, they'd lose interest. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. At some point, exhaustion took over, and I must have dozed off because I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing again. Another text. "Open the door." My blood turned to ice. The knife slipped out of my hand and clattered to the floor. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. A second later, there was a knock. It was soft at first, like someone was trying not to wake the neighbors. But then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. I crept toward the door, my heart hammering in my chest. There was no peephole, but I knew better than to open it. Instead, I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear anything on the other side. That's when I heard it. A whisper. It was faint, but unmistakable. Someone whispering my name, over and over. Jake, Jake. I stumbled back, my legs shaking so badly that I nearly collapsed. The whispering stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was another video. I opened it with trembling hands, and my stomach dropped. The footage was live. It showed my apartment door. From the hallway, the person filming was standing right outside. I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed my laptop, my wallet, and my car keys and bolted. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I just ran. Down the stairs, through the lobby, and out into the freezing Chicago night. I didn't stop until I was in my car, doors locked, engine running. My phone buzzed one last time. You can't run, Jake. We're always watching. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat and peeled out of the parking lot, my tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get as far away from that apartment and that screen as possible. I drove for hours, zigzagging through Chicago's endless grid of streets without a plan or destination. My mind was a storm of panic and confusion, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every car that appeared in my rearview mirror felt like a threat. Every pedestrian crossing the street seemed like they were watching me. I wasn't just scared, I was completely paranoid. At some point, I realized I couldn't keep running aimlessly. I needed to think. I pulled into a 24-hour McDonald's parking lot, parked in the furthest spot from the building, and killed the engine. The soft glow of the golden arches gave me just enough light to see without making me feel completely exposed. I locked the doors, sank low in the driver's seat, and pulled my phone out of my pocket. I'd been too scared to even look at it since leaving my apartment, but now I had no choice. If I was going to figure out who these people were and how to stop them, I needed to start somewhere. I opened the last message, the one that said, "You can't run, Jake. We're always watching," and stared at it for a long time. How did they know my name? My address? Hell, how did they even know I was watching the stream in the first place? I had so many questions, but no answers. That's when I remembered something. The link. The one X had sent me. Maybe if I went back to the source, I could find a clue. Something I'd missed. I powered up my laptop, using the McDonald's free Wi-Fi to reconnect to the deep web. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely type. When the Tor browser loaded, I tried going back to the link X had sent me, but it was gone. A 404 not found error stared back at me, mocking me with its emptiness. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, frustration bubbling over into anger. These people had already thought of everything. They were 10 steps ahead of me. But then I remembered something else, something I hadn't thought about in my panic. The chat box. During the stream, there had been other people watching, people who had been sending messages like, "Start with the hands," and "Make him scream." Maybe one of them knew something. Maybe they'd seen what I saw and had a way to stop it, or at least survive it. I started digging through forums, searching for any mention of the Red Room, the username X, or anything remotely similar. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but after what felt like hours, I hit a lead. A thread on some obscure forum, buried under layers of encrypted URLs. The title was simple: They Won't Let You Leave. It was written by someone named Watcher21, and the post was filled with frantic, fragmented sentences. If you've seen it, it's too late. Don't go to the police. They're everywhere. Don't try to hide. They'll find you. The only way out is to keep playing. Do what they say, and maybe they'll let you go. Maybe. The replies were just as unhinged. People claiming they'd been stalked, threatened, even kidnapped after watching a Red Room stream. One user said they'd received videos of their family members being followed. Another claimed they'd been forced to participate in a Red Room or risk becoming the next victim. The deeper I read, the more hopeless it all sounded. These weren't just random internet trolls messing with people. This was a full-blown organization, something massive, powerful, and completely invisible. I was about to close the thread when I noticed one reply that stood out. It was from someone named Tracerote, and it was written in perfect, professional-sounding English. No typos, no panic, just cold, calculated advice. They use your own technology against you. Webcams, phones, even smart home devices. If you've been targeted, disconnect everything. Go off the grid. They don't just watch, they track. But if you're looking for answers, start with the darknet marketplace. Look for the name Inferno. It's not just a stream, it's a system. Inferno. The name sent a chill down my spine. I'd heard whispers about it before, in those late-night YouTube rabbit holes about deep web horror stories. Supposedly, Inferno wasn't just a single website or organization. It was an entire network of illegal activity: drugs, weapons, human trafficking, and yes, Red Rooms, the worst of the worst. I didn't want to dig any deeper, but at this point, what choice did I have? If these people were going to come after me no matter what, I needed to know who they were and how to stop them. I found a marketplace link in one of the threads and clicked it. The page that loaded was like something out of a nightmare. It was laid out like a cheap version of eBay, complete with categories and search filters. But instead of electronics or collectibles, the listings were for things like untraceable firearms and custom torture requests. One listing caught my eye immediately. Red Room private access, starting at $10,000. The description was short and to the point. Live, interactive experiences. Private streams available upon request. Satisfaction guaranteed. There was even a section for customer reviews. Most of them were glowing. Absolutely brutal, worth every penny. The screams were so real, 10 out of 10 would buy again. Fast service, no glitches, thanks. I felt sick reading it. These weren't just criminals, they were psychopaths, and they were treating human suffering like a goddamn product. But there was one review that stood out. It was shorter than the rest, and it didn't have the same gleeful tone. Don't trust them. If you're watching this, it's already too late. Run. The username was familiar. Watcher21, the same person who had written the forum thread. Before I could process what it all meant, I noticed something strange. The cursor on my screen started moving on its own. It scrolled up and down the page, then stopped on one of the listings. Red Room, live tonight, midnight. It clicked the link, and a countdown appeared. 4 hours. That's how long I had until the next stream. And then, a message popped up on my screen. You're invited. Don't disappoint us. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse racing. How the hell were they controlling my computer? I disconnected everything. I'd gone through every precaution I could think of, and yet they still had access. The realization hit me like a freight train. I wasn't running from them. I was running toward them. For the next 4 hours, I stayed in that McDonald's parking lot, too scared to move. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every car that drove by felt like it was slowing down just a little too much. I kept checking the time, watching the countdown in my head. When midnight finally came, my laptop turned on by itself. The screen lit up, and the stream started automatically. This time, the room was different. It wasn't gray and empty. It was somewhere new, somewhere familiar. The walls were lined with cheap white paneling, and the floor was covered in dirty beige carpet. A single overhead light cast long flickering shadows across the space. In the center of the room was a chair, and sitting in the chair was me. Not a video of me, not a reflection. It was me. My exact clothes, my exact posture, my face, pale and wide-eyed with terror. The figure in the mask stood behind the chair, holding a knife. And then the screen went black again. When the screen went black, I froze. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. My mind raced through every possible explanation, but none of them made sense. How could they have me on camera, sitting in a room I'd never been to, wearing the clothes I was wearing right now? It wasn't just impossible, it was insane. I slammed the laptop shut again, hoping that somehow it would make all of this stop, but it didn't. My phone buzzed on the seat next to me, and for a moment I debated throwing it out the window. Instead, I grabbed it, half expecting another taunting message or video. But it wasn't a message this time. It was my GPS. The screen had lit up, displaying a location I didn't recognize. The directions were already loaded, complete with a route. I stared at the address, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. But the longer I stared, the more dread began to creep into my gut. The address wasn't random. It wasn't even far away. It was an abandoned warehouse on the south side of Chicago, one I'd driven past dozens of times. I remembered it because it was the kind of place you told yourself you'd never go near. Broken windows, rusted out fencing, graffiti everywhere. The kind of place you only saw in true crime documentaries or those viral urban exploration videos where everything ends in disaster. The GPS wasn't asking me to come. It was daring me. For the next few minutes, I sat in my car, paralyzed by indecision. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, to get the hell out of Chicago and never look back. But there was another part of me, a stupid, reckless part, that couldn't just ignore it. What if this was my chance to end it, to face whatever or whoever was behind all of this? That part of me won. I started the car, pulling out of the McDonald's parking lot and heading south. The streets were eerily quiet, and every red light felt like it lasted a lifetime. The GPS guided me with unsettling precision, recalculating instantly every time I tried to take a wrong turn. It felt like I wasn't driving myself anymore, like I was being pulled toward the destination. When I finally arrived, the warehouse looked even worse than I remembered. The building loomed over me like a giant tombstone, its jagged edges silhouetted against the pale glow of the city lights. My car's headlights caught bits of movement. Rats scurrying through the overgrown weeds, shards of glass glinting in the broken windows. The air smelled like rust and decay. I parked a block away, not wanting to get too close. The last thing I needed was for someone, or something, to trap me in there. I grabbed the knife I'd taken from my apartment earlier, slipped it into my pocket, and stepped out of the car. As I approached the warehouse, I noticed something strange. The front door wasn't just unlocked. It was open. Not wide open, but cracked just enough to invite me inside. A single faint light glowed from somewhere deep within the building, flickering like a dying bulb. I hesitated, gripping the knife in my pocket so tightly my knuckles turned white. Every nerve in my body was on high alert, screaming at me to turn back, to run. But instead, I took a step forward, and then another, and another. The inside of the warehouse was worse than I'd imagined. The floor was littered with broken furniture, rusted metal, and piles of trash. The walls were covered in strange symbols. Some looked like graffiti, but others looked deliberate, like they'd been carved into the concrete with precision. I didn't recognize any of them, but they gave me a sick, uneasy feeling, like they were watching me. I followed the faint light deeper into the building, stepping over shattered glass and bits of debris. The further I went, the colder it got. It didn't feel like normal cold. It felt unnatural, like the kind of chill you get when someone's breathing down your neck. And then I saw it. The room. It was identical to the one I'd seen on the stream. Same gray walls, same flickering overhead light, same chair in the center of the floor. And sitting in that chair was me. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. Same clothes, same face, same terrified expression I'd had when I watched the stream. The only difference was that this version of me was tied up, just like the guy from the first stream. I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what I was seeing. Was it a trick? A hallucination? Some kind of elaborate deepfake? But as I stepped closer, I realized it was none of those things. The figure in the chair was real. Flesh and blood, breathing, trembling, alive. Before I could say anything, the overhead light flickered violently, and a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows. The masked man. The same blank white mask, the same black clothes, the same unnerving silence. He held something in his hand, a long, thin blade that glinted in the dim light. Without a word, he stepped behind the figure in the chair, behind me, and pressed the blade to their throat. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. "Don't do it!" The masked man tilted his head, as if considering my plea. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. He held it up, aiming it at me, and I realized with horror that it was recording. The screen on the phone showed a live feed of me, the real me, standing there, helpless, watching the nightmare unfold. And then, the messages started. At first they were faint, appearing on the screen of the phone like text overlays. Cut his face. Make him scream. Let him beg. I realized with a sickening twist in my gut that I wasn't just watching anymore. I was in the red room. The viewers weren't typing commands about some random victim. They were typing commands about me. The masked man dragged the blade across the figure's arm, my arm, and I screamed as a sharp, searing pain shot through my body. I looked down at my own arm, and there it was, a thin, bleeding cut that hadn't been there a second ago. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense, but the pain was real. I stumbled backward, clutching my arm as the masked man took a step toward me. His presence felt suffocating, like the air around him was heavier, darker. I wanted to run, to fight, to do something, but I was paralyzed. The phone buzzed again, and this time, the message was different. "Your turn." The masked man tossed the blade at my feet, the clatter echoing through the room like a gunshot. I stared at it, then back at him, and for the first time, he spoke. Choose. His voice was low and distorted, like it had been run through some kind of filter. It sent chills down my spine. Choose, he repeated. Him or you. I looked back at the figure in the chair, at the other version of me. Their eyes were wide with fear, pleading, begging for mercy. But deep down, I knew there was no mercy here. There was no escape. There was only the choice. The blade felt cold and heavy in my hand as I picked it up. The room was so silent, I could hear my own shallow, panicked breaths echo off the concrete walls. The masked man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me through that blank white mask, waiting. His presence wasn't just menacing, it felt otherworldly, like I was in the presence of something beyond human comprehension. I looked at the knife in my hand, then at the figure in the chair. At me, or whatever it was. My doppelganger, my clone. I didn't know, and I didn't have time to figure it out. The pain in my arm was real. The blood trickling down my sleeve was real. Somehow, everything happening to him was happening to me, and I couldn't tell where one of us ended and the other began. Choose, the masked man said again, his distorted voice reverberating through the room like a threat. Him, or you. I tried to speak, but my throat was so dry that the words came out as a croak. I don't understand. What do you want from me? The masked man tilted his head, almost like he was amused. Then he stepped closer, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a phone again and held it up, showing me the live feed. But this time, the feed wasn't just the room we were in. It was my car, parked outside the warehouse. The camera zoomed in on the passenger seat where my phone lay, and then it panned out to the street, to the sidewalk, and to a figure standing in the shadows watching the car. A figure wearing a mask. I felt my knees go weak. They weren't just watching me here. They were everywhere. They'd been following me from the moment I clicked that link, maybe even earlier. No matter where I ran, no matter where I hid, they'd find me. They already had. You can't escape, the masked man said, as if reading my thoughts. You're part of the system now. The system. That word echoed in my mind, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't just about the red room. This wasn't just about me. This was about control, about fear, about power. The red room wasn't just a show for sick, twisted viewers. It was a game, a test, and I was the latest pawn. The masked man gestured toward the figure in the chair. Choose, he said one last time. I stared at the knife, my hands shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out, but there wasn't one. If I refused to play, I'd be next. If I played along, I'd be sacrificing what? Myself? Some twisted copy of me? I didn't even know what was real anymore. I took a step toward the chair, my legs feeling like lead. The figure in the chair, the other me, started thrashing, their muffled screams growing more desperate. Tears streamed down their face, and their eyes locked onto mine, silently begging me to stop. I'm sorry, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. I don't have a choice. The knife felt heavier with every step I took, like the weight of it was pulling me down into the floor. When I reached the chair, I raised it, my arm trembling so violently that the blade almost slipped from my grip. But then, something unexpected happened. The lights flickered again, and the room plunged into darkness. For a moment, I thought I'd blacked out, but then the light came back, and everything had changed. I wasn't in the warehouse anymore. I was in my apartment. My chair, my desk, my walls. All of it was exactly how I'd left it. The knife was still in my hand, but the room was empty. No masked man, no doppelganger, no blood. Just me. I dropped the knife and staggered back, my mind spinning. Was it over? Had I imagined all of it? I turned to look at my laptop, which was sitting on the desk, its screen still dark. Slowly, cautiously, I opened it. The browser loaded instantly, and there it was, the stream. But this time, it wasn't showing a room. It was showing me, sitting in my apartment, staring at the screen, just like before. And then, the chat started again. He's back. Do it again. Let's see him bleed. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, no, no. I slammed the laptop shut, but my phone buzzed before I could even take a breath. Another video. My hand shook as I opened it, already dreading what I was about to see. The video showed me in the warehouse, holding the knife, standing over the chair. The figure in the chair, my doppelganger, was slumped forward, motionless. Blood pooled on the floor beneath them, spreading in slow, deliberate ripples. The camera zoomed in on my face, capturing every ounce of horror, every tear streaming down my cheeks. I dropped the phone, bile rising in my throat. That wasn't me. I didn't do that. I couldn't have done that. But then I noticed something else. Something worse. The video wasn't just a recording. It was live. I stumbled back, my vision swimming, my head pounding like it was about to explode. The room felt smaller, darker, like the walls were closing in around me. And then I heard it. A knock at the door. It was soft at first, almost polite, but then it came again, louder this time, more forceful. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The knocking stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then a piece of paper slid under the door. A single, folded note. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to know what it said. But my curiosity, my stupid, relentless curiosity, got the better of me. I picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded it. The note had just 2 words, written in jagged, messy handwriting. Tag, you're it. I dropped the note and backed away, my chest tightening with panic. But before I could do anything, before I could even think, the light in my apartment flickered and went out. I was plunged into total darkness, and in that darkness, I heard it. A whisper. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer, until it was right next to my ear. Choose. And then, everything went black. When I woke up, I was back in the chair. The same gray room, the same flickering light, the same masked man standing over me. Only this time, the roles had reversed. I was the one tied up. I was the one thrashing against the restraints. And in front of me, holding the knife, was someone else. Someone who looked exactly like me. The stream was still running. The chat was still scrolling. And the messages were as cruel as ever. Make him suffer. Do it slow. Let's see some pain. The masked man placed a hand on my double shoulder, guiding them forward, and I realized with sickening clarity that the game wasn't over. It had just begun. I found a secret YouTube channel, only accessible through the dark web, the video show, things that haven't happened yet. Alright, so I know how this is going to sound. You're going to think I'm making it up, or that I just have way too much time on my hands. But I swear on everything I own, this is real. I wasn't even going to post this, but every time I try to just forget about it, I feel this sinking weight in my chest, like someone's pressing a cinder block against me. I need to get it out. Maybe someone here has an explanation. So let me start from the beginning. It was a Thursday night, one of those boring, nothing is happening kinds of nights. My roommate Jake and I were sitting in our apartment, scrolling TikTok, while a rerun of The Office played in the background. You know, the usual lazy vibe. Jake, being Jake, started going off about how everything on the internet is fake now, how TikTok is staged, YouTube's full of clickbait, Instagram's just people faking perfect lives. You've probably heard it all before. Then out of nowhere, he says, "Hey, want to check out the dark web?" At first, I laughed it off. Like, who even does that? The dark web always felt like one of those urban legends, scary in theory, but not something normal people actually mess with. But Jake, he's the kind of guy who thinks anything sketchy is an adventure. He pulled out his laptop and started downloading Tor, the browser you apparently need to access the dark web. I kept telling him it was a bad idea, but he just waved me off like, "Relax, man. We're not buying drugs or hiring hitmen. I just want to look around." That's how it started, with boredom and bad decisions. Once we were on, it was weird. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Everything felt off. You know how when you scroll through Reddit or Twitter, there's this sort of flow. Like, you know what's trending, you know the vibe. On the dark web, it's like stepping into a basement where you're not supposed to be. All the sites are super plain. Black backgrounds, plain white text, and cryptic links. No logos, no ads, nothing. Jake clicked around for a while, mostly landing on forums full of people selling stolen credit cards or arguing about conspiracy theories. It was creepy, but honestly, pretty boring. And then we found it. Jake clicked on a random link that just said Neptune Gateway. The page it took us to was plain, just a black screen with a single search bar in the middle and the words "Search Your Reality" written above it. It didn't make sense, but something about it felt wrong. Like, just looking at it made my stomach twist. "Dude, what even is this?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. Jake shrugged. "No idea. Let's find out." He typed something stupid. "Jake rules," into the search bar and hit enter. Nothing happened at first. The page just sat there, like it was buffering. Then out of nowhere, the screen went black. For a second, I thought the laptop crashed, but then a video started playing. It was a YouTube video, but not on YouTube. The layout was similar enough. Title at the top, a play button, and a progress bar at the bottom. But the interface was off. The colors were wrong, and there was no channel name, no views, no comments. Just the title, 1:32 p.m., December the 23rd, 2024. We stared at it, confused. That was 2 days in the future. Jake clicked play. At first, the video was shaky, like someone was filming on their phone. It showed the inside of a Starbucks, the kind you'd find anywhere. There were a couple of people sitting at the tables, a barista working the espresso machine. Nothing unusual. But then the camera panned to the door. A guy walked in, mid-30s, wearing a black hoodie. He looked totally normal until he pulled out a gun. "Holy shh," I started, but Jake shushed me. The video got chaotic fast. The guy started yelling, waving the gun around. Everyone in the Starbucks froze. A few people ducked under tables. Someone screamed. The camera zoomed in on the guy's face, and I swear I could see every detail. His scruffy beard, the scar over his left eyebrow. It didn't look like a movie or some stage prank. It looked real. Too real. Then the video ended. No credits, no fade out. Just black. Jake and I sat there, staring at the screen. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. Jake was already typing into the search bar again. This time, he typed, Los Angeles McDonald's. Another video popped up. The title read, 3:45 p.m., January 14th, 2025. He clicked play. This one showed a McDonald's, bright and busy. Kids were running around. Parents were ordering food. The whole thing was chaotic, but normal. Then the camera focused on a single table near the corner. A man and a woman were sitting there, arguing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the tension between them was obvious. Then the man reached under the table, pulled out a knife, and I can't even type it out. It was bad, the kind of bad that makes your stomach turn. The video cut off before anyone could scream. Jake slammed the laptop shut. Okay, nope. We didn't talk for a while after that. I think we were both trying to process what we'd just seen. The videos were too real. Like, no movie or prank could have captured that kind of raw terror. But the dates, they hadn't even happened yet. Were we watching the future? I told Jake to delete Tor, to just forget about it. He agreed, but later that night, I called him back on the site, typing something else into the search bar. When I asked him what he was doing, he said, I just want to see one more, just to make sure it's fake. I should have stopped him. I should have smashed the damn laptop, but I didn't. And now I can't stop wondering if what we saw that night was real, or if we've somehow made it real by watching. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the Starbucks video. The man's face, the gun, the terror on everyone's faces. It didn't help that Jake's room was right next to mine, and I could hear him on his laptop well into the night. The guy doesn't know when to quit, and honestly, neither did I. The next morning, I tried to play it cool, made coffee, scrolled Instagram, pretended I wasn't thinking about what we'd seen. But Jake, he looked like crap. Dark circles under his eyes, hands jittery like he'd had way too much caffeine. I asked him if he'd gone back on the site, and he just mumbled something about research. By lunchtime, I started feeling like I was losing my mind. You know how your brain plays tricks on you when you're trying not to think about something? I kept catching myself jumping at little sounds, the hum of the fridge, the ping of a notification on my phone. I even started Googling random stuff, trying to find any mention of the videos we'd seen, but there was nothing. It was like they didn't exist. Then Jake came into the living room, holding his phone. He looked pale, like sickly pale. Dude, he said, his voice shaky. You need to see this. He shoved his phone into my hand. It was a news article. The headline, Gunman opens fire in downtown Starbucks. 3 dead, 2 injured. I swear to God, I felt my stomach drop. The article was from a local Seattle news site. It described exactly what we'd seen in the video. The Starbucks layout, the man in the black hoodie, the chaos. The timestamp on the article, 1:32 p.m., December 23rd, 2024. The same as the video. I sat down hard on the couch, my head spinning. This has to be a coincidence, I said, though I didn't believe it. Jake shook his head. There's no way. It's too specific. We spent the rest of the day glued to our phones, refreshing Twitter and news sites for updates. Every detail matched. The description of the shooter, the exact sequence of events. It was like the video had been a script, and the world had followed it perfectly. But how? How could a random dark web video predict something like this? Jake didn't say much after that. He just sat there, staring at the floor, like he was trying to piece something together. I tried to convince myself that it was some elaborate hoax, that maybe the video had been uploaded after the shooting and the date was fake. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. We'd seen it 2 days before it happened. We both knew it. That night, I woke up to the sound of voices. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, but then I realized it was coming from Jake's room. I got up, heart pounding, and crept down the hall. His door was cracked open, and I could see the glow of his laptop screen. He was on the Neptune Gateway site again. "Jake, what the hell are you doing?" I snapped, pushing the door open. He jumped, slamming the laptop shut. "Nothing. I was just looking." "Looking at what?" I demanded. He didn't answer, but I could see the guilt all over his face. I grabbed the laptop and opened it. The screen was still on the dark website. Another video was queued up, paused, on the title screen. 12:07 a.m., January 3rd, 2025. "What is this?" I asked, my voice rising. Jake ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my eyes. I wanted to see if it would happen again. "You're insane," I said, slamming the laptop shut. "Do you even realize what you're messing with? This isn't a game, Jake. People are dying." He looked up at me then, his eyes wide and haunted. "I know. That's why I need to know. What if we can stop it?" I didn't have an answer for that. The idea of preventing something like the Starbucks shooting was tempting, sure, but at what cost? What if watching these videos somehow caused the events to happen? I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with something far bigger and darker than we understood. The next few days were tense. Jake stayed locked in his room, barely eating or talking. I started avoiding him, afraid of what I might find if I confronted him again. But then, on January 3rd, something happened that I can't explain. It was almost midnight. I was scrolling through Instagram, trying to distract myself, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. It was from a small town in Texas, somewhere I'd never even heard of. The headline: "House Fire Kills Family of 4. Cause Unknown." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The timestamp on the alert: 12:07 a.m., the exact time on the video Jake had queued up. I burst into Jake's room without knocking. He was sitting on his bed, his laptop open in front of him. The screen showed the aftermath of the fire, flames consuming the house, firefighters spraying water, neighbors standing in the street with horrified expressions. The video ended with a close-up of the charred remains of the house, the camera lingering like it was savoring the destruction. Jake looked up at me, his face pale and sweaty. "I didn't watch it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I swear, I didn't watch it until after it happened. I didn't know what to say. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. But if Jake hadn't watched the video beforehand, then what the hell was going on? Was the site showing us things that were destined to happen no matter what? Or was it making them happen? That's when things got even worse. Jake became obsessed. He started spending all his time on the Neptune Gateway site, searching for more videos, more predictions. At first, I tried to stop him, to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. He said he needed to understand how it worked, that maybe we could use it to save people. But deep down, I think he just wanted to know how far it would go. The videos started getting darker. Murders, car accidents, kidnappings, each one more horrifying than the last. And every single one of them came true. But then we found a video that wasn't like the others. The title was different, just a string of numbers and letters, like a code. And when Jake clicked on it, the The screen didn't show some random event or location. It showed us. The camera was in our apartment, filming from the corner of the living room. I could see myself sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, completely unaware. And behind me, creeping out of the shadows, was a man wearing a black mask and holding a knife. The title, 3:15 a.m., January 7th, 2025. The date was 4 days away. When I saw that video, the one of us, something inside me snapped. It was like all the fear and unease I'd been bottling up exploded at once. I grabbed Jake by the shoulders and shook him so hard he nearly fell off the bed. "Turn it off!" I screamed. "Delete it! Delete the whole goddamn site! This isn't a game anymore, Jake!" But Jake just sat there, staring at the screen, frozen. His face had gone pale, his mouth hanging open like he couldn't even process what he was seeing. "Jake!" I yelled again, shaking him harder. "Do you hear me? Delete it!" Finally, he seemed to snap out of it. He shut the laptop with trembling hands, but I could see the gears in his head still turning. I could tell he was already trying to figure out what to do next. "That was our apartment," I said, pacing the room like a madman. "Our actual apartment. Someone's coming here, Jake. Someone's going to kill us." Jake didn't respond. He just sat there, staring blankly at the floor. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he whispered, "It doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" I snapped. "That some psycho's coming to murder us? I'd say that's pretty damn clear." "No," Jake said, shaking his head slowly. "The video, it was filmed from inside the apartment, but no one's been here. We've been home all day. How could someone record us without us knowing?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. He was right. The angle of the video, filmed from the corner of the living room, was impossible. That corner didn't even have furniture, let alone a place to hide a camera. And yet, the video was real. I'd seen myself sitting on the couch, scrolling my phone. I was even wearing the same hoodie I had on right now. Jake stood up suddenly, grabbing his laptop. "I need to check something." "Jake, no," I said, blocking the door. "We're done with this. Do you hear me? You're deleting that site right now." But he pushed past me, muttering something about figuring it out as he headed to the living room. I followed him, my heart pounding. I didn't want to be in that room, not after what we'd seen. Every shadow felt like it was hiding something. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Jake sat down on the couch, the same spot I'd been sitting in during the video, and opened his laptop. He logged back onto the Neptune Gateway site, ignoring my protests, and typed something into the search bar. I couldn't see what it was, but a new video popped up. The title this time was just a single word: "Closer." "Don't," I begged, my voice shaking. "Please, Jake, don't play it." But he did. The video started with a black screen, like all the others, but this time there was no title card, no timestamp, just darkness. Then slowly, the camera panned up, revealing what looked like a street at night. It was hard to tell where it was at first, but then I saw it, the corner of our apartment building. The camera was moving closer, heading straight for us. "Oh my God," I whispered, backing away from the screen. The video cut to the hallway of our building. The camera was shaky, like someone was walking while holding it. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the background, growing louder as the camera approached our apartment door. I could see the scuffed paint, the number 203 hanging slightly crooked. That's us," Jake said, his voice barely audible. The camera stopped in front of the door. lingering for a moment. Then, slowly, it reached out and turned the doorknob. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard the lock click in the video, which meant the door wasn't locked. I glanced at our front door. It wasn't locked now, either. "Lock it," I hissed. "Lock it right now." Jake jumped up and ran to the door, twisting the deadbolt into place. But the video kept playing. The camera was inside our apartment now, moving through the living room. It stopped in the corner, the same corner where the earlier video had been filmed, and set itself down. The screen went dark for a moment, and when the video resumed, the camera was pointed directly at us, at Jake and me, standing in the living room, staring at the laptop. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. That's not possible." The video froze, lingering on our terrified faces before cutting to black. For a second, neither of us moved. The only sound was my ragged breathing and the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Then Jake slammed the laptop shut, like that would somehow stop whatever was happening. "We're leaving," I said, grabbing my coat. "Right now. We're not staying here another second." Jake nodded, but before we could move, we heard it. A knock. Not loud or frantic, just a soft, deliberate knock at the front door. Jake and I froze. My heart was beating so hard, it felt like it was going to explode. Slowly, Jake reached for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He dialed 911 and put it on speaker. The operator answered, but before Jake could say anything, the knock came again. This time, it was louder. 911, what's your emergency?" the operator asked, her voice calm but urgent. "There's someone outside our door," Jake whispered. The knock turned into banging, heavy and relentless. The door shook on its hinges. I backed away, clutching a lamp like it was some kind of weapon. Jake shouted into the phone, begging for the police to hurry, but I could barely hear him over the pounding. Then, as suddenly as it started, the banging stopped. We stood there, frozen, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But the silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. Finally, Jake crept toward the door, his phone still pressed to his ear. "Don't!" I hissed. "What are you doing?" But he didn't listen. He leaned close to the peephole, peering out into the hallway. "Is anyone there?" the operator asked. Jake didn't respond. He just stood there, staring through the peephole, his face pale and slack. I moved closer, my heart in my throat. "Jake?" I whispered. "What do you see?" He didn't answer. I grabbed his shoulder, shaking him. "What do you see?" Finally, he turned to look at me, his face blank. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, in a voice so soft, I could barely hear it, he said, "There's no one there." Jake's words hung in the air like a death sentence. "There's no one there." No one. After all the pounding, the violent shaking of the door, the terror that something or someone was trying to break in. There was nothing. I wanted to believe him, but the look on his face wasn't relief. It was worse. It was as if what he didn't see had scared him even more. "What do you mean, there's no one there?" I hissed, clutching the lamp tighter, my knuckles turning white. "Check again." Jake didn't move. He just kept staring at me with that same haunted expression, his face pale and hollow, like he hadn't slept in years. "It doesn't make sense," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "There was someone. There had to be." The operator on the phone broke the silence. "Sir, officers are en route. Please remain calm and stay on the line." Stay calm? Was she kidding? My brain was screaming at me to run, to get out of the apartment, to leave everything behind and just keep running until I couldn't feel this suffocating sense of dread anymore. But my legs wouldn't move. It felt like I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the oppressive silence that had fallen over the apartment. And then, the floor creaked. Not by the door, not in the hallway, but behind us. I spun around so fast, I nearly dropped the lamp. My eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the noise. But everything looked normal. The couch, the coffee table, the empty corner where the camera had supposedly been set up in the video. Nothing was out of place. But that creak, it was real. It was so real. "Jake," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Did you hear that?" He nodded slowly, his eyes wide and glassy. He was gripping his phone like it was a lifeline, his knuckles as white as mine. "Hello?" the operator said again, her voice tinny and distant. "Are you still there? Officers are..." The call cut off. The phone screen went black. Jake swore under his breath, tapping the screen frantically, but nothing happened. The phone was dead. Not just out of battery. Dead like it had been bricked. The kind of dead that doesn't make sense. "Try your phone," Jake said, his voice cracking. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, my hand shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. But as soon as I did, the screen flickered and froze. Then it shut off completely, just like Jake's. "What the hell is happening?" I whispered. Jake didn't answer. He was staring past me now, his face pale as a ghost. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Slowly, I turned to follow his gaze. The corner. The empty corner where the camera had been in the video. It wasn't empty anymore. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. My brain refused to believe it. There was a figure standing there, hunched and still, shrouded in shadow. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its head was tilted at an odd angle, like it didn't quite understand how to hold itself upright. Its face was obscured, but I could see its eyes, black, empty pits that seemed to drink in the light around them. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to fight, to do something, but I was frozen. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just watched us. Jake made the first move. He grabbed the lamp out of my hands and hurled it at the figure with a yell. The lamp hit the wall and shattered, leaving a jagged black mark on the paint. But the figure didn't flinch. It didn't even react. It was like the lamp hadn't existed at all. "Get out!" Jake screamed, his voice breaking. "Get the hell out of our apartment." The figure tilted its head further, like it was curious. Then, slowly, it raised one long bony hand and pointed at us. No, not at us. At Jake. "Don't," I whispered, grabbing his arm. "Jake, don't move." But he was already moving. He lunged forward, grabbing the nearest thing he could find, a heavy bookend from the coffee table, and swung it at the figure. For a moment, I thought it might actually work. The bookend connected with the figure's head, and the force of the impact sent it staggering back. But then, it laughed. The sound was low and guttural, like metal grinding against metal. It didn't have a mouth, but the laughter filled the room, vibrating through the walls, the floor, my skull. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just in my ears, it was in me. And then the figure moved. It didn't walk, it didn't run, it just appeared. One moment it was in the corner, and the next it was inches away from Jake, its hand wrapped around his throat. Jake choked and clawed at the hand, but it was like fighting a statue. The figure didn't even budge. Let him go, I screamed, grabbing the nearest chair and swinging it at the figure with all my strength. The chair shattered on impact, splinters flying everywhere. But the figure didn't react. It didn't even acknowledge me. Its black, empty eyes were locked on Jake's, like I wasn't even there. Jake was turning blue now, his hands going limp at his sides. I panicked, grabbing a shard of the broken lamp and stabbing it into the figure's back. This time, it did react. It let out a horrible, inhuman shriek and dropped Jake to the floor. Go, I yelled, grabbing Jake's arm and dragging him towards the door. We have to go now. Jake was coughing and gasping for air, but he managed to get to his feet. We ran for the door, fumbling with the deadbolt and throwing it open. The hallway was empty, but I didn't care. We sprinted for the stairs, not daring to look back. As we reached the bottom floor, I glanced over my shoulder. The figure was standing at the top of the stairs, its head tilted at that unnatural angle, watching us, and then it vanished. We didn't stop running until we were 3 blocks away, standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of a 24-hour gas station. Jake was still coughing, his hands trembling as he leaned against the wall. I pulled out my phone again, hoping against hope that it would work. This time, it turned on. But when I opened the screen, I nearly dropped it. There was a notification, a new email from Neptune@gateway.com. Subject: You can't run forever. Body: 3:15 a.m. Don't forget the timestamp on the email: 2 minutes ago. We didn't go back to the apartment. That was never even a question. After we caught our breath outside the gas station, we spent the next hour driving aimlessly through the city, trying to figure out what to do. Jake was silent the entire time, his eyes fixed on the road like he was afraid of what might happen if he stopped moving. I couldn't stop checking over my shoulder, expecting to see that thing, that figure, standing in the middle of the street, watching us. It never came, but the weight of its presence never left. It was like the fear had soaked into my skin. We eventually parked in an empty Walmart lot, surrounded by the eerie glow of buzzing streetlights. Jake had his laptop with him. He always did, and as soon as we stopped, he opened it. I wanted to tell him not to. I wanted to grab it and throw it out the window, but I didn't. Part of me needed answers too. Part of me thought, maybe, just maybe, we could end this if we understood what was happening. The Neptune Gateway page was still open. I don't think it's just a website, Jake said quietly, his voice hoarse from screaming earlier. What do you mean? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Jake rubbed his eyes, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. I've been thinking about it. The videos, the predictions, the thing we saw. It's like it's not just showing us stuff. It's connected, like it's feeding off us. The more we watch, the worse it gets. I didn't want to believe him, but deep down, I knew he was right. The first video had been horrible, sure, but it hadn't felt personal. Now, it felt like we were the ones being hunted. So what do we do? I asked. Can we shut it down? Jake shook his head. I don't think it works like that. It's not just some site you can delete. It's bigger. I didn't press him. I wasn't sure I could handle knowing exactly what bigger meant. Instead, I asked the only other question that mattered. What about the email? The timestamp, 3:15 a.m. That's tonight. Jake hesitated, then opened the email again. He stared at it for a long time, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Finally, he said, Maybe it's a warning. Or a threat, I muttered. Jake didn't respond. Instead, he typed 3:15 a.m. into the Neptune Gateway search bar and hit enter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a new video appeared. It didn't have a title. It didn't have a timestamp. Just a single word, written in jagged, blood-red letters. Finale. "Don't," I said, my voice shaking. "Jake, don't open it." But he already had. The video started in darkness, like all the others. But this time, there was sound. Low, static-filled breathing that made my skin crawl. Then the screen lit up, showing a familiar view. The inside of our apartment. It was filmed from the same angle as before, the same corner where the figure had appeared. But now, the living room was empty. No couch, no coffee table, just an empty, shadow-filled space. And then the camera turned. The view shifted, moving slowly down the hall toward the bedrooms. The breathing grew louder, heavier, filling the small space with an oppressive weight. I gripped the edge of my seat, my heart pounding in my ears. I knew where the camera was going. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't look away. The camera reached my room first. It lingered on the closed door for a moment before pushing it open. The bed was unmade, clothes scattered on the floor. Empty. Then it moved to Jake's room. Same thing. Empty. But the camera didn't stop there. It turned again, pointing toward the mirror at the end of the hall. For a moment, I thought the mirror was empty. But then I saw it. United States. Jake and me, sitting in his car, staring at the laptop. The image was grainy, distorted, like it was being filmed from far away. But it was unmistakably us. Same car, same parking lot, same fear etched across our faces. "What the hell?" Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. The camera zoomed in, closing the distance between itself and the mirror. The reflection of us grew larger, clearer, until it filled the entire screen. I could see every detail now. The way Jake's hands were shaking as he held the laptop. The way my chest rose and fell in shallow, panicked breaths. Then the reflection moved. Not us. The reflection. In the video, I saw myself glance over my shoulder, my eyes widening in terror. Then I saw Jake do the same. But in real life, neither of us had moved. We were still staring at the screen, frozen in place. The reflection stood up. They turned towards something off-screen, their bodies tense and trembling. Then, slowly, they began to scream. "Turn it off!" I shouted, grabbing for the laptop. But before I could reach it, the screen went black. The static-filled breathing stopped. For a moment, there was nothing, just silence. Then a single word appeared on the screen, written in the same jagged, blood-red letters. "Look." The car windows shattered all at once, the sound like gunshots in the still night. Glass rained down on us, and I screamed, throwing my arms over my head. Jake yelled something, but I couldn't hear him over the deafening noise. The streetlights around us flickered and went out, plunging the parking lot into darkness. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, I saw the figure. It was standing just outside the car, its face inches away from the glass. Those black, empty eyes stared back at me, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could feel was the overwhelming weight of its presence, crushing me, drowning me. The figure raised one hand and pointed at me. Then it smiled. Not with a mouth. Its face was still blank, but I felt the smile. I felt it like a knife twisting in my gut, cold and sharp and final. "Run!" Jake screamed, throwing open his door. I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled out of the car, my legs barely holding me up, and took off into the night. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it behind me, feel its presence growing closer with every step. Jake was right behind me, his footsteps pounding against the pavement. We didn't know where we were going, just away. Away from the car, the lot, the thing that had followed us from the screen into the real world. We never stopped running. That was 2 weeks ago. I don't know where Jake is now. We got separated somewhere in the chaos, and I haven't heard from him since. My phone doesn't work anymore, and every time I try to use someone else's, I see the same notification. 3:15 a.m. Don't forget. The videos don't stop either. Every night they find me. In hotel rooms, libraries, crowded coffee shops. They play on TVs that aren't plugged in, on phones that aren't mine, on mirrors that shouldn't show anything but my own reflection. And every time the message is the same. You can't run forever. I don't know what happens at 3:15 a.m. I don't want to find out. But I know one thing for sure. Neptune Gateway wasn't just a website. It's something else. Something ancient and hungry and cruel. And now, it's in me. If you ever see that search bar, search your reality. Close your laptop. Walk away. Burn it if you have to. Because once you open the door, it doesn't close. Not ever. I paid a dark web hacker to reveal what the government is hiding. The truth about NASA's space missions terrifies me. Hey, so I wasn't sure if I was going to post this, but I feel like I have to get it out. Even if no one believes me, at least I'll know I said something. I feel like this is the kind of thing people end up calling a cautionary tale, but at the time, I didn't see it like that. I just thought it'd be fun. I don't know. I just wanted answers. I've always been a curious person, sometimes to a fault. Like, I'm the kind of guy who falls down rabbit holes on YouTube for hours, watching conspiracy theory videos and weird documentaries. I'd always laugh them off afterward, like, yeah, sure, the moon landing was fake. Or, totally, the Denver airport is a portal to hell. It was entertainment, nothing more. But the deep web, that always felt like the real forbidden fruit. I'd heard all the horror stories about people stumbling into red rooms or hiring hitmen on there, but it always seemed so outlandish to me. Like, no way does any of that stuff actually exist, right? It's just stuff people make up to scare each other. But then there's this subreddit I follow. It's kind of like our No Sleep, but more about people's real experiences online. Someone posted a thread about hiring a hacker on the dark web to uncover dirt on the CIA and the stuff they claim to find crazy, like experiments with human cloning and MK Ultra files. So, yeah, I was hooked. I stayed up all night reading the thread, scrolling through comments and digging deeper into this supposed dark web hacking community. At first, I didn't think it was real. But then, someone posted links, like actual onion links, claiming to be gateways to the hacking forums. I won't say exactly how I got access, mostly because I don't want anyone dumb enough to try it. But let's just say it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. All you need is Tor, a VPN, and the kind of reckless curiosity that overrides your common sense. Once I was in, the site looked boring. I guess I was expecting some sinister vibe, like glitchy text or creepy skull graphics, but nope. It was mostly just a plain black background with a search bar and a few categories: info retrieval, blackmail, corporate leaks, and special requests. I clicked on info retrieval because, let's be real, I wasn't looking to ruin anyone's life. I just wanted answers. Scrolling through, I saw stuff like spouse cheating, hire me to find proof, corporate sabotage, get your competitors' secrets. And then, the one that caught my eye, government files unlocked. Want to know the truth? Message me. The profile name was something dumb like X-Truth Seeker X. The post had dozens of comments, mostly people claiming it was a scam, but a few swore the guy was legit. I wasn't convinced, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked the message button and typed out something dumb like, "Hey, how does this work?" He replied within minutes. His grammar was terrible, which somehow made it feel more real. Send request. Price depends on difficulty. Pay in BTC only. What you want. I almost backed out right there, but then I thought, what's the harm? Worst case, I lose some Bitcoin I got years ago when it was dirt cheap. I replied, I want to know what NASA is hiding. I didn't think he'd even respond, but he did. And his reply was just one word: expensive. I asked how much, and he sent me his Bitcoin wallet address with an amount, 0.5 BTC. At the time, that was like $15,000. I stared at the number for a long time. Was I really about to do this? Here's the thing. I had the money. Back in 2014, I bought a bunch of Bitcoin as a joke. Never sold it because I forgot about it. Now, it was worth enough to make stupid decisions like this without completely ruining my life. So, yeah. I sent the payment. The guy said he'd need 48 hours. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe some fake documents, a cheesy PDF about aliens or something. But then, 2 days later, I got a message. Files ready. Check attachment. Don't share. The file was zipped and password protected. When I opened it, there were hundreds of documents, images, and even videos. At first glance, it looked like the kind of nonsense you would find on conspiracy sites. Grainy photos of UFOs, blurry figures on Mars, that sort of thing. But then I opened one of the videos. It was from inside a NASA control room. There was no sound, just grainy security footage. The timestamp said it was from 2011. At first, it looked normal. People sitting at computers, monitoring screens. But then I noticed one of the screens in the background. It showed what looked like Earth, only it wasn't. The continents were wrong, like almost right, but not quite. The shapes were distorted, the coastlines didn't match. And there was something else. 3 massive black shapes hovering over the planet. Not like spaceships, but more like shadows. I paused the video and stared at the image. It felt wrong, like looking at something my brain couldn't fully process. I clicked to the next video. This one was different. It looked like it was shot on a phone. The camera was shaky, and I could hear heavy breathing. The person filming was walking down a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were metal, with pipes running along the ceiling. It didn't look like NASA or any Earth-based facility I'd ever seen. At the end of the hallway was a door. The person filming opened it, and what I saw next made my stomach drop. It was a room filled with bodies, but they weren't dead. At least, I don't think they were. They were floating, suspended in these glass tubes, filled with some kind of glowing blue liquid. They looked human, but something was off. Their eyes were too big. Their fingers were too long. I slammed my laptop shut. My heart was racing. I felt like I'd just seen something I wasn't supposed to. Something I couldn't unsee. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those floating bodies. I told myself it was fake, that it had to be fake. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. And then, at 3:17 a.m., I got another message from the hacker. They know you have the files. Delete now. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Before I could even process what he meant, my power went out. The last thing I saw before my laptop shut off was the light from my webcam blinking. When the power cut out, I just sat there in the dark, frozen. You ever get that feeling like someone's watching you, even when you know you're alone? That's exactly what it felt like. Except this time, I wasn't so sure I was alone. The faint glow from my phone was the only light in the room. I scrambled to grab it, nearly knocking it off my desk. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely unlock it. No messages, no notifications, no missed calls. I flipped on the flashlight and shined it around the room. Everything looked normal. Bed, desk, shelves, all untouched. But that didn't make me feel any better. I grabbed my laptop, hoping maybe the battery still had a little charge left. But when I hit the power button, nothing happened. Dead, completely fried. I don't know why, but the first thought I had was this them? Whoever them was. I stood there in the silence, listening for any sound, footsteps, whispers, anything. That's when I heard it. Not inside the house, but outside, faint and muffled, like a low hum. I walked to the window and slowly pulled back the curtain. My neighborhood was pitch black. No streetlights, no porch lights. The entire block was out, but parked across the street was a black SUV. The engine was running, and I could see 2 figures sitting inside. No logos, no plates, just a plain black SUV. My stomach twisted into a knot. It wasn't unusual to see cars parked out there, but something about this one felt off. The way it was just sitting there, engine idling, like it was waiting for something or someone. I dropped the curtain and stumbled back into the room, my heart pounding. This is stupid, I thought. You're being paranoid. It's just a coincidence. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Not for a second. Then my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a text from an unknown number. Delete the files. I stared at the message, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't reply, didn't even touch the phone. I just sat there, trying to wrap my head around what was happening. How did they have my number? How did they even know I had the files? Before I could think too hard about it, another text came through. You've been warned. Warned? About what? I started pacing the room, muttering to myself like some lunatic. This is a joke. It's a scam. They're just messing with me. But the more I said it, the less I believed it. I tried to think of who I could call. The police? Yeah, right. What was I gonna say? Hey, I hired a hacker on the dark web, and now some shadow government is coming after me. They'd laugh me out of the station. My mind raced. I needed to get out of the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't just stay there. I grabbed a backpack, stuffed it with a few essentials, wallet, phone charger, some clothes, and headed for the door. The second I stepped outside, I felt it. That heavy, suffocating sensation, like the air itself was pressing down on me. The SUV was still there, engine purring softly. I tried not to look at it, but I couldn't help myself. The driver's side window was rolled down just enough for me to see someone's face, or at least a part of it. The man was wearing sunglasses, at night. His face was expressionless, almost robotic. He didn't look at me, didn't move, just sat there, staring straight ahead. I got into my car and drove. I didn't have a plan, just an overwhelming need to get as far away from my house as possible. I figured I'd head to a Starbucks or McDonald's or somewhere with people. Strength in numbers, right? About 15 minutes into the drive, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. The black SUV. My chest tightened. I made a quick right turn, then another, zigzagging through random streets, but no matter what, the SUV stayed behind me. Not tailgating, not speeding, just keeping a steady distance. I ended up pulling into the parking lot of a 24-hour Walmart, hoping I'd lose them in the crowd. I parked, got out, and walked straight into the store without looking back. The fluorescent lights inside were almost blinding, but I felt safer with people around. I grabbed a cart, mostly to blend in, and started wandering the aisles. But I couldn't focus. My eyes kept darting towards the entrance, waiting to see if they'd followed me inside. And then I saw him, the man from the SUV. He wasn't wearing sunglasses anymore, but I recognized his face, sharp jawline, clean-shaven, no real defining features. He was just average. So average, it made him almost forgettable. He didn't even look at me, just walked past with a cart of his own, like he was actually there to shop. I turned down another aisle, my hands gripping the cart handle so tight, my knuckles turned white. I kept glancing over my shoulder, but every time I thought I'd lost him, I'd catch a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye. He wasn't following me, not directly, but he was always nearby. I ended up in the electronics section, standing in front of a wall of cheap burner phones. That's when it hit me. I needed to ditch my phone. If they were tracking me, that's how they were doing it. I grabbed the cheapest phone I could find, paid for it in cash at the self-checkout, and slipped into the restroom. I smashed my old phone against the sink until the screen shattered, then flushed the SIM card down the toilet for good measure. When I came out, the man was gone, or at least I couldn't see him anymore. I hurried back to my car, clutching the burner phone like it was some kind of lifeline. The SUV was gone too. I let out a shaky breath, half convinced I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I got home, something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. I know for a fact I locked it when I left. I stepped inside, every nerve in my body screaming at me to turn around and leave. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept through the house, flipping on every light as I went. Nothing seemed out of place until I got to my bedroom. The laptop was back on the desk. It wasn't fried anymore. The screen was on, and there was a single document open. The words on the screen made my blood run cold. "We warned you." And then I heard it, a soft creak, like someone shifting their weight. It was coming from the closet. I didn't even think. I just ran out the door, down the street, not stopping until I reached the main road. I ended up checking into a crappy motel off the highway, too scared to go back home. But even here, I don't feel safe. Every time I close my eyes, I see those bodies floating in the tanks. Every time I hear a car outside, I think it's the SUV coming to finish the job. And the worst part, I still have the files. I couldn't bring myself to delete them. Something tells me this is far from over. The motel wasn't much. A flickering neon sign that buzzed like a dying fly, stained carpets, and the kind of damp smell that clung to your clothes. But it felt safer than home, at least for now. The desk clerk didn't even glance up when I checked in, just slid me the key like he didn't want to know my name. Perfect. I locked the door behind me and shoved the dresser in front of it, just in case. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone in my hand. I needed to call someone, but who? The police were useless. My family wouldn't understand. And my friends? They'd either think I was insane or that I was trolling for attention. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, almost mocking me. It was 3:33 a.m. The kind of time when the world feels off, too quiet, too still. My mind started to spiral, replaying everything over and over. The SUV, the man in Walmart, the floating bodies in the tanks. None of it made sense, and yet it felt real. I couldn't sit there anymore. I grabbed my laptop, the one I swore I'd leave at home, and opened it. The files were still there, staring back at me like some cursed relic. I hadn't even scratched the surface yet. There were hundreds, maybe thousands of documents. I clicked on a random one, trying to convince myself it was all fake. The file was a transcript. At first, I thought it was just a conversation, but the more I read, the more it felt wrong. Subject 0417 has shown increased resistance to the sedative. Recommend doubling the dose before the next session. Negative. Higher doses risk metabolic collapse. Proceed with the extraction as planned. Understood. Extraction, ETA. 14 hours. Prep the transport team. No names, no locations, just cold clinical language, like they were talking about lab rats, not people. I scrolled down and found a series of images attached. The first was an aerial photo of what looked like a facility in the middle of nowhere. Flat desert, barbed wire fences, and a single dirt road leading in. No signs, no markings, just endless nothingness. The second image made me nauseous. It was an autopsy photo. The body looked human, mostly, but the skin was pale, almost translucent, and the eyes were wrong. Too large, too black, like they'd been scooped out and replaced with something artificial. The third image was worse. It showed what looked like a surgical procedure, but the patient wasn't sedated. Its mouth was open in a scream, but there were no restraints, no signs of struggle. It was just lying there, completely still, as someone in a hazmat suit worked on its chest. I slammed the laptop shut and stumbled to the bathroom, my stomach churning. I barely made it to the toilet before throwing up everything I'd eaten in the last 24 hours. What the hell had I gotten myself into? When I came back to the bed, my phone buzzed. It was the burner. No caller ID, just a message. You shouldn't have opened the files. My heart nearly stopped. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. How did they know? Had they hacked my laptop? My phone? Were they outside, watching me, right now? I peeked through the curtains, but the parking lot was empty. No SUV, no strange men, just a stray dog sniffing at a dumpster. But that didn't make me feel any better. The phone buzzed again. This is your last chance. Delete them. I threw the phone on the bed, like it was going to explode. My pulse was pounding so loud, I could hear it in my ears. They wanted me to delete the files. But why? If they were fake, why would they care? Before I could think too much about it, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then went out completely. My room was plunged into darkness. I grabbed the burner phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam of light wavered as my hand shook. I shined it around the room, half expecting to see someone standing in the corner. But there was no one. And then I heard it, a scraping sound, faint but deliberate, coming from outside, like metal dragging against metal. My chest tightened as I slowly moved toward the window. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Pulling the curtain back just an inch, I peered outside. The parking lot was still empty, except for one thing. A figure stood in the middle of the lot, facing my room. They were wearing a long coat, their face obscured by the shadows. At first, I thought it was the man from the SUV, but this person was taller, thinner. They didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, like they were waiting for me to make the next move. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the bed. My flashlight landed on the dresser, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. I scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. And then the scraping sound started again. It wasn't outside anymore. It was coming from the closet. My whole body went cold. The closet door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see the darkness inside. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, like nails on a chalkboard. I grabbed the lamp off the nightstand and threw it at the closet. It shattered against the door with a deafening crash, and the noise stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, and then the door creaked open. I don't remember running. I don't remember grabbing my keys or starting the car. The next thing I knew, I was speeding down the highway, my knuckles white as I gripped the wheel. I didn't care where I was going, as long as it was away from that motel. But the further I drove, the more I realized something was wrong. The road was empty. No cars, no lights, no signs, just endless darkness. My headlights barely pierced the thick fog that seemed to have come out of nowhere. I checked the clock on the dashboard. 4:04 a.m. But my phone said it was 3:17. And then I saw it, the SUV, parked on the side of the road, its headlights off. As I sped past, I saw someone standing next to it. They weren't wearing a coat this time, just a white shirt, stained with something dark. Their face was blank, expressionless, but their eyes were black. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, the SUV's headlights clicked on, and it started following me. The headlights of the SUV in my rearview mirror were like two glowing eyes, watching my every move. No matter how fast I drove, no matter how many turns I took, it stayed with me. I floored the gas pedal, the engine screaming in protest, but the SUV never fell back. It didn't speed up either. It just stayed there, like it was toying with me. The highway was a straight shot, nothing but black asphalt cutting through the fog. Trees lined the sides of the road, their shadows stretching like claws in my headlights. Every so often, I thought I saw movement in the trees, dark shapes shifting just out of view, but I couldn't look for long. My focus was on the SUV, on the way it followed me with an almost mechanical precision. I tried to shake it by turning off onto a smaller road, one that cut through a dense patch of forest. It was the kind of road that felt wrong, like you shouldn't be driving down it. The pavement was cracked, overgrown with weeds, and the fog hung even thicker here. My headlights barely lit more than a few feet ahead, but the SUV followed me. I don't know how it was keeping up. The road was too narrow, too winding, but it never missed a turn. I could hear its engine now, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't just following me anymore. It was getting closer. I glanced in the rearview mirror and felt my stomach drop. The driver's seat of the SUV was empty. No one was behind the wheel. No one was driving. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the road. My chest heaved as I gasped for air, my pulse hammering in my ears. The SUV stopped too, its headlights still glaring at me. And then the driver's door opened. I couldn't see who or what got out. The headlights blinded me, casting long shadows that seemed to ripple and move on their own. I strained to see through the light, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. A figure stepped into view. It wasn't the man from Walmart or the person I'd seen outside the motel. This one was different, taller. Their limbs were too long, their movements too smooth, like they weren't human. They wore a plain black suit, but their head was tilted at an unnatural angle, like they were studying me. And their eyes weren't just black. They were empty, like holes drilled straight into their skull. The figure started walking toward me, slow and deliberate. I didn't think. I just threw the car into reverse and slammed on the gas. The tires screeched as I shot backward, the figure growing smaller in my headlights. But then the SUV's headlights turned off. I stopped, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The road was dark now, the fog swallowing everything. I could barely see a few feet ahead. I kept the car in reverse, my foot hovering over the gas, waiting for the figure to reappear. But it didn't. Instead, I heard a tapping sound. It was faint at first, like raindrops on glass, but it grew louder, sharper, until it was deafening. It was coming from the back of the car. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to just drive, to get the hell out of there. But I couldn't stop myself. My hand moved on its own, adjusting the rearview mirror, and there it was. The figure was crouched on the trunk of my car, its face pressed against the back window. It smiled at me. Not a normal smile, but a wide, impossibly stretched grin that revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. Its head tilted again, almost playfully, as if it was daring me to move. I screamed and floored the gas pedal. The car shot backward, and I swerved violently, trying to throw it off. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. It just stayed there, grinning, as if it was enjoying the ride. Then it started to crawl. Its limbs bent in ways that made my stomach churn, bones snapping and popping as it dragged itself toward the driver's side window. Its fingers, long clawed things, scraped against the glass, leaving deep gouges. I swerved again, harder this time. The car fishtailed, and for a second, I thought I'd lost it. But then the driver's side window shattered. The figure reached inside, its clawed hand grabbing for me. I screamed and lashed out, hitting it with whatever I could find. My phone, the GPS, even a half-empty water bottle. Nothing worked. Its grip tightened, pulling me toward the broken window. And then the horn blared. It was deafening. A single sustained note that seemed to vibrate through the entire car. The figure froze, its head snapping toward the sound. Its grin disappeared, replaced by something else. Fear. The horn cut off as suddenly as it started, and the figure let go of me. It crawled back out the window and disappeared into the fog. I didn't wait to see where it went. I hit the gas and tore down the road, my tires kicking up gravel. The SUV was gone. The figure was gone. But I knew it wasn't over. I drove for hours, not caring where I ended up. When I finally stopped, it was in the parking lot of a gas station. The sun was starting to rise, casting a faint orange glow over the horizon. I stumbled inside, my hands still shaking. The clock gave me a weird look, but I didn't care. I just needed to be around people, to feel normal again. But as I stood there, trying to catch my breath, I noticed something. The TV behind the counter was playing a news report. The anchor was talking about a fire, a massive blaze that had destroyed a private research facility in the desert. No survivors. They didn't give many details, but the aerial footage was enough. It was the same facility from the photos in the files. And then the clerk spoke. "Hey, you okay, man?" I turned to him, trying to come up with something to say. But before I could, he nodded toward the parking lot. "Your buddy's waiting for you." I froze. "What?" The clerk pointed out the window. I turned, my heart pounding. There, parked in the corner of the lot, was the SUV, and standing next to it was the figure, its empty eyes staring straight at me. The clerk's voice felt distant, like I was underwater. Your buddy's waiting for you." Those words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My body locked up as I stared out the grimy gas station window at the SUV parked in the corner of the lot. And then I saw it. The figure was still there, standing perfectly still, like it had been carved out of the shadows themselves. Its head tilted slightly, its empty eyes locked on me. No grin this time, just that awful, unrelenting stare. It wasn't smiling anymore, but somehow that was worse. "What the hell is wrong with you, man?" the clerk said, snapping me out of my trance. I turned to him, my voice shaky. You see that? That guy by the SUV?" The clerk frowned, leaning over the counter to look out the window. He squinted, then shrugged. "What guy? I just see a car." My stomach dropped. No, there's someone there," I said, my voice rising. "Look again." He gave me a long, skeptical look, but before he could respond, the lights in the gas station flickered. For a split second, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the TV behind the counter was nothing but static, and the humming fluorescent bulbs overhead buzzed louder than before. "Must be the power acting up again," the clerk muttered, but his tone was different now. He sounded uneasy. I didn't look back out the window. I couldn't. Instead, I backed away from the counter, my hands trembling. My phone, no, the burner, buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated, every fiber of my being screaming at me not to check it. But I did. It was a text from an unknown number. "You're out of time." Before I could process what it meant, the automatic doors of the gas station slid open. The whoosh of air sent chills down my spine. I turned slowly, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. The figure was inside now. It stood just beyond the threshold, framed by the flickering lights of the gas station. Its head was tilted so far to the side, it looked like it might snap off. Those black, empty eyes seemed to bore into my soul, pulling me into a void I couldn't escape. The clock let out a sharp gasp. "What the?" He didn't get to finish. The lights went out again, plunging the room into pitch blackness, and then I heard it. A wet, sickening crunch. The kind of sound that makes your stomach turn, like bones breaking under too much pressure. When the lights came back on, the clerk was gone. Not just dead. Gone. The only sign he'd ever been there was the blood splattered across the counter and the smoldering remains of his name tag, warped and melted beyond recognition. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I bolted toward the back of the store, weaving through aisles of chips and soda like they might somehow protect me. My only thought was to get away, to hide, to survive. But no matter where I ran, I could hear it. The figure's footsteps, slow, deliberate, and impossibly heavy, like the ground itself was straining under its weight. I ducked into the storage room and slammed the door shut, pressing my back against it. My breaths came in shallow gasps as I fumbled for something, anything to defend myself with. My hand landed on a rusty crowbar lying on a shelf. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. I strained my ears, trying to pick up any sound, but there was nothing. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator units and my own ragged breathing. And then, a voice. It came from the other side of the door, low and guttural, like it was being dragged up from the depths of something ancient and unholy. "Give it back." My grip on the crowbar tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about," I shouted, my voice cracking. "You took something that doesn't belong to you." The files. It was talking about the files. "I'll delete them," I screamed. "I swear, I'll delete them. Just leave me alone." The voice chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that made my skin crawl. "It's too late for that." The door shuddered violently, like something massive had slammed into it. Dust rained down from the ceiling as the hinges groaned in protest. I backed away, raising the crowbar like it was some kind of magical shield. My eyes darted around the room, searching for another way out, but there was nothing. Just shelves of inventory and a single boarded-up window. The door shuddered again, harder this time. And then it stopped. Silence. I stood there, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring, waiting for the next impact. But it never came. Instead, the lights in the storage room flickered once, twice, and then dimmed to an unnatural red. And that's when I saw it. The figure was inside the room. It didn't come through the door. It didn't break down the walls. It was just there, standing in the corner, its head twisted at an impossible angle. Its grin was back now, wider than before, stretching across its face like a wound. "You can't run," it said, its voice echoing inside my head. I swung the crowbar with everything I had, but it didn't connect. The figure didn't even flinch. It just stood there, watching me, with those awful, empty eyes. And then it moved. It didn't walk or crawl. It just shifted, like it was skipping frames in a video. 1 second, it was in the corner, and the next, it was right in front of me. I screamed, swinging the crowbar again, but it grabbed my wrist. Its touch was ice cold, burning into my skin like frostbite. I dropped the crowbar, my arm going limp. "You wanted the truth," it whispered, leaning in so close I could feel its breath. "Now you'll live it." Before I could react, it placed its hand on my chest. Pain exploded through my body, a searing, electric agony that felt like I was being ripped apart molecule by molecule. My vision blurred, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was its grin. I woke up in the middle of the desert. The sun was blinding, the heat suffocating. My throat was dry, my skin burned, and my clothes were soaked in sweat. I had no idea how I'd gotten there or how long I'd been unconscious, but I wasn't alone. The SUV was parked a few feet away, its engine idling. The driver's door was open, but no one was inside. And on the ground in front of me was my laptop. The screen was on, displaying a single file. "Welcome." I didn't want to open it. I knew I shouldn't open it, but my hands moved on their own, clicking the file. It was a live video feed. The camera was pointed at a metal room, sterile and cold. In the center of the room was a tank filled with glowing blue liquid, and inside the tank was me. The feed cut out. The laptop shut itself off, and the SUV's engine roared to life. A voice came from the speakers, low and guttural, the same one I'd heard in the storage room. "Your turn." The SUV's headlights flicked on, blinding me, and then it charged.